everybody, it's Lanz MacDonald. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, we talk about all things relationships, friendships, self-love, and everything in between. So if that's something you're interested in, be sure to subscribe. As you can see by the title of today's video, we're going to be talking about how to know when enough is enough in a relationship. And we may be starting to question whether we want to stay in our relationship or not for a variety of reasons. Maybe you feel like your relationship has lost its spark or its novelty. Maybe you feel like you've been mistreated or neglected. Or maybe you just feel like your unity and synergy as a couple has been compromised. And I want to preface this video by saying that it's a good thing that you are not giving up at the first sign of adversity. It means you're a mature dater and you understand that if you want to achieve a long-term relationship, you're going to endure some level of conflict. But we need to be wise about what type of conflict we're working on and who we're working on it with. Ending a relationship can be a very difficult thing to let your mind wander to because we often operate from what's called a sunken cost mentality, which basically means that we feel like we've already put this amount of time and energy into the relationship and it would be a waste and all for nothing if we chose to end it. Plus, it can be very daunting and exhausting to even consider putting yourself back out there. Not to mention, we don't know what's on the other side. So we'd rather convince ourselves that there isn't someone better suited to us. Most people I talk to who say that they're on the fence about whether they want to continue their relationship or not often say that they can't stomach the thought of having to start over with someone new. So they'd rather stick it out with who they're currently with and comfortable with. Or they may be in the mental conflict of it's too good to leave, but too bad to stay. And people choose to stay in their relationships for a variety of reasons. It could be that you've achieved a certain level of comfortability and familiarity with them. Maybe you got together at a very significant point in your life. Maybe your friend group is very intertwined with one another. Maybe you're very close with their family. You may live together. The list goes on. And while those are all significant factors in wanting to stay in your relationship, you need to remember that you're having these thoughts for a reason. So it's important that you learn how to address them. And if you're noticing these problems now, even if they seem minor or manageable for the time being, they will often become the demise of your relationship down the line. And the way that these seemingly minor issues typically present themselves is when you've moved past that initial honeymoon phase in the relationship and you're starting to see each other as the complicated and multi-dimensional individuals that we naturally are. These traits become apparent when we start to open up a little bit more and get a little bit more vulnerable with our partner. And that mask starts to slip from our idealized self and what we want our partner to see us as versus who we truly are. And this certainly doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be a very beautiful bonding moment to be able to share a part of yourself with your partner that the rest of the world doesn't get to see. But we do need to take precaution when in the process of our partner revealing that less perfect self, there's things they do or things they say that are starting to conflict with your own moral compass and values. The biggest mistake we make in not advocating for our own happiness is when we start to notice these things, but we choose to take a cool, complacent, or unbothered approach. And by not addressing them and taking them seriously, it's only going to lead to further friction and resentment down the line. One thing is for sure, you cannot strategically blind yourself to the actions of your partner that are not sitting right with you, because the more you ignore it, the more it's just going to fester and compound. And this is why we see so many incompatible matches drag on for years before their inevitable ending. I think one of the most interesting things I've observed about my past relationships as well as my friends is that the writing was often on the wall much sooner than we wanted to acknowledge. And the major issues that presented themselves down the line had a fair bit of foreshadowing first. But those observations were the things that we chose to minimize, not because we'd like to cause ourselves pain, but because we're hopeful and optimistic that it's something we'll be able to look past or ignore. And this is where we'll often gaslight ourselves and say, well, no one's perfect and neither am I, which isn't inherently wrong, but it's not a good enough reason to stay, especially when it's causing you emotional distress. And relationships certainly aren't about not having problems, but it's about choosing which problems you're willing to work on and compromise on and how many problems you have. So let's apply a practical application to this. If you're considering whether you want to stay or leave your relationship, I want you to think of this in 2 stages. The first step is going to be to consciously and presently observe your own thoughts and actions as well as your partner's. And then the second step is going to be to act accordingly based on those observations. So as I mentioned, in this first step, I want you to consciously observe your own thoughts and actions as well as your partner's. And I want you to look at your relationship and how it is in this exact present moment. And take what you observe as a data point without casting any judgment or panic. I don't want you to try to minimize things. I don't want you to fix things. In this stage of observation, we're simply letting things flow uninterrupted. This is because when we see things as objectively and neutrally as we can make better informed decisions about what to do next. So let's start by observing your own thoughts and actions. What are your general feelings towards your partner and the relationship? And try to get as granular as possible. Think through your average day from morning to evening and how you think and feel and act. Obviously, we know you love your partner on the macro scale. That's what's making this so hard and conflicting. But this is about addressing and analyzing those day-to-day interactions and feelings. Do you feel like you offer your best self to this person, or do you find yourself acting out of character a lot? Maybe you're irritable or dismissive, maybe even aggressive. Or on the other end of the spectrum, maybe they've caused you to shut down and feel very small. Do you feel anxiety? Do you experience mood swings as a result of the behavioral patterns that have started to form in the relationship? Or maybe you feel like there's things you haven't voiced or that have been left unattended to. Or maybe you feel like your trust has been compromised with this person. One of the most pivotal moments that I realized in my change in actions from my past relationships is when I started to realize that I was hiding certain things that my partner was doing from my friends and loved ones. It is a major red flag when the people that love you the most and only want what's best for you would find it disappointing to hear how you've been treated in the relationship. Another major thing to note is if you feel like your effort and sacrifice is very one-sided and you feel like you are tending to this person without receiving any gratitude or reciprocation. If you live together, how do you feel waking up beside them? How do you feel spending the day with them and going to bed at the end of the night? And if you don't live together, do you feel joy sending or receiving that good morning text? Do you feel at peace throughout the day? Do you feel like their presence still has sustenance even if you're not physically together? Another thing to note is if you find yourself hanging on to the good old days and you're trying to get back to what it initially was or felt like. Another way to think of this is you're not making new memories anymore and there isn't that same effort being made. And this can be something as simple as planning an occasional date night, spending that quality time together, dressing up to look good for one another, complimenting each other, and having those deep heart-to-hearts that allow you to explore and be curious about your partner on a deeper level. So this ties into the second part of the observation stage where I want you to observe your partner's actions and treatment towards you. So when observing their actions, do you feel like they have stopped putting in effort, whether that be communication-wise or the way that you like to be shown love, which can be through physical touch, words of affirmation, acts of service, spending quality time, and so on? Have they started to feel comfortable pointing out your flaws or your insecurities? This is a really interesting one because it's often not presented in the most direct way. Oftentimes these disrespectful comments will be masked as something playful when in reality they are intended to hurt you in some way. Be very aware of these types of recurring comments in your relationship, because oftentimes if your partner is battling their own insecurities, they will use this as a way to project that insecurity onto you to make you feel small. And if you feel like a comment has crossed the line, you are absolutely entitled to call them on it, because a good, healthy love should be based on affirmation and support, not hostility and insecurity. Other observations to note about their behavior are if they're speaking very dismissively or disrespectfully to you, or when you try to offer your perspective or input, it falls on deaf ears. So as a whole, in this stage, as you're starting to observe your own thoughts and actions as well as your partner's, I want you to start to think about the specific elements that are making you feel like your relationship is being compromised. So now this leads to the second step where I want you to act accordingly based on these observations. And so for this, I want you to make a list of your negotiables and non-negotiables. And this is going to be different for everybody. An example of a negotiable could be that you're more of a homebody, but your partner likes to go out from time to time. So you're more than happy with them going out with their friends and you can hang out when they get back. Another negotiable could be that you're more of a night owl and they like to go to bed early, so you have no problem with them going to bed before you. An example of a non-negotiable could be around cleanliness and sharing the housework. If keeping an orderly home is a high value to you and you feel like your partner isn't pitching in, this can lead to a lot of resentment down the line. And it sounds very funny to say that you would end a relationship over cleaning habits, but more often than not, it's those day-to-day behaviors and routines that either make or break the compatibility in a relationship. Our lives are comprised of the little decisions and habits that we make every day. And if you aren't in alignment with your partner on a good number of these things, it simply won't work, no matter how much you try to look past it. Now, on a larger scale, one of your non-negotiables could be that you know you want to get married and have kids one day. And if your partner doesn't feel the same, don't stay in that relationship in hopes that you're going to convince them one day. It's not fair to you or to them, and you're going to be wasting your time. As I've said in many previous videos, when people tell you who they are, you have to believe them, and it's not your job to change them. Now, when you reflect on your list, particularly the non-negotiables, because those are the things that really matter to you, how many of those are being upheld and honored? And how many non-negotiables have you started to push into the negotiable category just to keep your partner around? One mental prompt that really helps me when I'm reflecting on things like this is, if your relationship stayed like this for the rest of your life, would you be happy? And this certainly doesn't mean that you're not going to grow together and learn from one another as the relationship progresses, but you need to be happy with the majority of what you're already working with, especially the major pillars, which are their personality, their communication style, their religious values, their family values, their financial values, their job goals, who their friends are, their living habits, and so forth. And there is no correct answer for what any of these should be. This is simply about your compatibility with one another, because what could work for one person could be a deal breaker for another in terms of how they define a happy and healthy relationship. And the reason I consider each of these elements to be major pillars is because they are generally fixed, which means that they are incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to change. And do you want to change them? Is that fair to them? Is that fair to you? Do you want to spend all of this energy trying to change and alter this person to your desires when you may just simply accept that they may not be the best match for you? Dating really is a series of trial and error where we're looking to find the person that we have the best harmony with. And more often than not, those trials are not going to work out, and that is absolutely okay. With dating, you are essentially picking a person that you're attracted to and hoping for the best. And so you're going to have to go through quite a few no's before you find the person that you're most compatible with. Each relationship teaches us so many lessons about ourselves and the love that we desire, the way that we like to give love, and the passions and perspectives that we didn't have prior that our partners have introduced us to. So if you feel like your relationship has run its course, that is absolutely okay. Don't see this as a failure. People come into our lives and impact them in all types of ways, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're here to stay. Allow the ending to be painful. Allow yourself to acknowledge the parts that you loved and the parts that you're going to miss, while still understanding that it's okay to say that this isn't working anymore. It takes an incredible amount of bravery to say, I love you, but I want more than this. I deserve more than this. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad person, it just means that they're not your person anymore. Find peace in knowing that the relationship that you shared will always be yours and nothing can take that away from you. But also know that there is someone out there that is better suited to loving you in the way that you need and will offer you the fulfillment that you didn't even know was possible. One of the biggest things that I've realized from my own past relationships is, yes, relationships take work, but there is a difference between work and suffering. Although there may be things that you need to work on from time to time, for the most part, your relationship should be relatively easy. You shouldn't be enduring multiple sleepless nights. You shouldn't feel like you're not enough for them or you have to change who you are. And you certainly shouldn't have to overstep your own boundaries just to keep the relationship afloat. I'm so tired of people being fed this narrative that it's not love if it isn't hard. This is how you end up adopting a very toxic mentality that every relationship has its problems, so you should just stay no matter what. I promise you, you are only going to hurt yourself in the end if you adopt this mentality, and I am saying this to my past self as well. When you stay no matter what, that's when the real pain sets in, because you're going to start to realize that you don't even recognize the person you become in the process of trying to save your relationship. When you know who you are and what you won't tolerate, you won't allow yourself to be disrespected or dismissed. And you're going to acknowledge that you are deserving of a healthy, safe, joyous, good love and not a heavy heart. So if you're in the process of deciding whether you want to stay or leave your relationship, I want you to ask yourself a few things. What isn't sitting right in your spirit? What feels like it's out of alignment? And what's making you stay? If you feel like the good still outweighs the bad, then absolutely give it a try and work on it. But if you feel like you're staying in your relationship because that person defines you in some way, or you feel like you can't live your life without them, you need to ask yourself why that person holds so much power over you. You need to ask yourself why you're willing to compromise on your own values and why your peace isn't taking priority. I want to end off this video by reminding you that you are more than enough, and the right person will never make you feel like you're asking for too much. In a healthy and loving relationship, you will never have to change or compromise on the things that matter most to you, and you certainly will not have to overstep your own boundaries to make it work. So that's all I have for today's video. I hope that this resonated with you in some way, and as always, please leave your opinions and experiences down below because I love reading and responding to your comments. If you haven't already, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and feel free to follow me on Instagram, which is @Lanz MacDonald. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your week, and I will see you next video. Bye!